And next, if you'd introduce yourself. And
Absolutely. Good afternoon. John Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. Thank you all for having this hearing. We're happy to be here, but also representing DNI, Dudley Neighbors Incorporated, and some of the other land trust network organizations that operate within the city. Our perspective is a little bit different, but feeds into some of the arguments about deed restrictions. And we understand, let's be clear at the beginning, that we understand that housing is a problem, and that we understand that we want to have sensible deed restrictions. And within the context of land trust, which are about community ownership and stewardship, we promote this concept of community wealth, which refers more to the collective assets and resources within a community that contribute to the well-being, economic stability, and long-term prosperity of its members. This concept, which is strongly reflected in the history of Black struggles in this country for equality, emphasizes the importance of local ownership and control over resources, which can include financial capital, land, businesses, housing, and other assets that generate income and opportunities for community members. Community wealth-building strategies focus on creating inclusive and sustainable economic systems that empower communities, particularly those that have been historically marginalized. The goal for us is to retain and circulate wealth within the community, rather than allowing it to be extracted by external entities. This approach is often linked to initiatives like cooperative ownership, community land trusts, local investment in businesses, all aim at reducing inequality and building long-term financial security for residents. And by emphasizing this importance of equitable access to wealth-generating assets and community-driven decision-making, community wealth building seeks to address systemic barriers that have existed for a long time and promote and sustain economic justice. As advocates of this program, we emphasize their potential to address long-standing issues, such as the racial wealth gap, which is integral to what we're discussing today, and the lack of generational wealth in Black and brown communities. An important aspect of this is keeping affordable housing and protections in place through these deed restrictions, an approach that not only allows the building of savings and equity, but also protects housing from predatory lending and speculative real estate only serving corporations and a few individuals. Recently, there was a WGBH report that indicated that in 2021, business entities purchased nearly 6,600 single-family homes across the state, more than 9% of all single-family homes sold. That's nearly double the rate of such purchases a decade ago, according to GBH, and their analysis of the data, which was provided by the Warren Group. Investors and other businesses, the majority of them limited liability companies, spent more than $5.6 billion last year in Massachusetts purchasing these properties, the majority in cash, to rent or flip as the state's housing market rises. Rates of investor purchases in 2- and 3-family homes are even higher. And the purpose is not to close racial wealth gaps, but to increase it and lessen the possibilities of people owning homes. So what's happening is that by them purchasing that, and they're denying the access and opportunity for people who are coming into the market to purchase these homes. Adam Travis, who's a Harvard doctoral candidate who studies rental housing and does research in this area, says more and more rental properties are coming to be owned not by individuals, but by companies and business entities. Investors are spurred by high demand for housing, rising rents, and soaring home values, making it a lucrative business. Institutional investors are increasingly buying homes that would have been available for first-time home buyers. By 2030, institutional investors are estimated to own over 40% of all single-family rental homes nationwide. They are targeting areas prone to higher rent growth. I understand, Diane respectfully said that we don't care about what's happening in San Francisco and Cambridge, but we were at a meeting the other day where I think somebody from the Fenway CDC talked about Mission Hill and talked about how many of those homes are now owned by a single LLC, right? And so it's happening here, it's already happening, and it's increasing. Communities, especially those that are historically marginalized, often face significant barriers, including limited access to capital, a lack of infrastructure, and systemic inequities. Overcoming these challenges require not only local efforts, but we think broader systemic changes, which can be difficult to achieve, and we acknowledge that. It has become more and more difficult for individuals to purchase homes. Rents are very, very high. How are we dealing with poverty and preserving wealth in our communities? It is important to look at multiple pathways, as there are some problematic aspects to just looking exclusively as homeownership as the only vehicle to accumulate wealth, which has created a lot of instability. James Jennings, who is a professor emeritus at Tufts, says that a glaring link, a missing link in the proposal for a free market with weakened long-term deed restrictions will increase black wealth is how such might take place specifically in the context of continuing and entrenched racial inequalities. Black and Latinx persons have higher rates of poverty, unemployment, homelessness, severe housing cost burdens, and health ailments. There are clear racial and ethnic patterns in the face of historical inequalities in Boston. We cannot afford to think in absolutes. Again, we understand that housing is a problem. We understand that some of these deed restrictions are a problem. We can't just eliminate them, however, because we may not be ready to respond to the outcomes, which may be unintended. Do we have folks in our community who will be able to purchase these homes at market rates and be able to keep affordability? Are we able to generate wealth in a market that is increasingly about wealth accumulation and wealth manipulation, where those who have wealth are now using their resources to buy all available housing? In this context, James Jennings wrote, the demographic and economic groups actually will be able to buy or invest in property that, once affordable, becomes unprotected by virtue of shortened deed restrictions. So to end, I just want to reiterate that there is some real danger, we should consider it, that gentrification will accelerate in an economic context where we have yet to resolve or eliminate entrenched racial issues rooted in our historical realities that have served to marginalize and eliminate progress for Black and brown people.
Thank you. Right on time. And next, could you introduce yourself and welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon, councilors. Thank you for inviting me here to speak about this very important topic. My name is Danielle Summer Kieta, and I'm coming to you today both as a housing advocate and on behalf of my family, my husband Kalamu, and our children, and as a resident of a deed-restricted home. In 1993, my mother bought a deed-restricted house in Roxbury and moved her family home. For her, the purchase of the property meant so much more than the ability to provide a roof over our heads and a stable address. It was a commitment and a love song to Eggleston Square, where we previously had lived and spent so much time, and a reaffirmation of her deep dedication to the greater good and to giving back to community. So my mother was a physician's assistant at the Lemuel Shattuck Hospital for nearly 30 years. The purchase of a deed-restricted home a little more than 10 years into that tenure meant that she could continue to work at the hospital providing medical care for many patients and residents in most need of that care and dedicated support. It meant that her children could continue to grow and experience the wealth of opportunities that this great city provides. And finally, it meant that she could afford the financial space to save and plan for a future where she could grow older in relative comfort, knowing that she was able to build a secure nest egg to allow her to weather potential unknowns. And that is a critical support because here now in 2024, my family and I are able to care for her. We are her caregivers, and to fulfill her wishes to be able to age in her home without worry. And that critical point, the ability to build a financial portfolio that supports the homeowner in whatever they might need, is certainly not unique to my family. It is true that it is a truth that it's a near universal benefit of homeownership, whether the home is deed restricted or not, that wealth generation is possible. And to be clear, families living in deed restricted homes are able to build wealth through their home ownership. While the valuation of a housing market can ebb and flow, the value of deed-restricted homes does increase over time, not unlike their market rate counterparts. So today, as we are meeting to discuss this issue, it shouldn't simply revolve around the fallacy that deed-restricted homes impede, prevent, or even abate wealth generation for Black residents. Rather, we need to ask ourselves whose wealth we are creating and how we measure what is for the greatest good and best impacts. Deed restrictions provide more than just financial opportunity and housing security to communities where they are located. They are in many ways a public benefit. We know that deed-restricted properties can help tamp down speculation in areas where increased developer activity might otherwise put pressure on rental market prices. These affordable homes are owner-occupied, and together with their stabilizing effects on renting prices, they support long-term residency, which is a key factor in improving community investment and outcomes, as well as the quality of life for residents in a neighborhood. In this way, deed-restricted homes are an investment in community wealth, building that prioritize that collective community benefit over the investment in the enrichment of a small number of individuals and families. Additionally, we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean when we talk about the impact of significantly changing current deed restrictions? If we understand the investment in affordable homes as an investment in our communities, well beyond the financial outcomes for any one individual or family, the fact is that if the length of deed restrictions is lowered, we are likely to see dramatic increases in the decrease in affordable housings across the city. Access to homeownership will decrease alongside, especially for Black and brown families who are less likely to have the income or other financial assets to be able to purchase market rate homes to begin with. And to that end, I would suggest that as we know that in communities like Roxbury, where it is true that in many places the 2 or 3 family homes are hovering around $1 million, and in some places that's true for single family homes, we need to ask ourselves, how do we provide for the Black and brown families that would want to be there to have that $1 million to begin with? And quite simply, there is no clear answer that could truly cover our entire communities. So I want to also say that this is compounded by a reality that the primary way that a homeowner captures the equity of their home is to sell. But the financial windfall is clearly tied to one's ability to purchase in a less expensive market. Thus, we see that in current homeownership in market rate homes in Black and brown communities, there are many Black and brown families that are choosing to sell and move out of Boston to capture that equity. A shorter length of restriction simply means that you're quickening the gentrification of communities. And there are other benefits to deed restrictions. I would point out that when you are a tenant, your rent is essentially the ceiling of what you pay. And when you're a homeowner, that mortgage is the floor. The reduction in mortgage interest, insurance, and lower real estate taxes on deed-restricted homes means that homeowners have the ability to increase their savings and better cover ongoing maintenance expenses that can happen during home ownership. That being said, this system is not without flaws. I think the process of resale on deed-restricted homes can be confusing, at times very challenging for the average homeowner. And I would additionally point out that I empathize with the families that Senator Wilkinson is representing here today. Clearly, there is some issues with this system, and there are previous ways in which Black and brown families have been either misled or the system is not clear enough, and we know that, and that is an area to grow. But it can hardly be said that that is an indictment of an entire affordable home ownership system, nor should it be understood to mean that the entire system needs some kind of major overhaul. Finally, I would like to address the unfortunate accusations leveled against advocates of deed restrictions, especially for those of us who are Black. People have accused us of being poverty pimps, or worse yet, unaware slaves or overseers, perpetuating a system of agendas of the ruling class that seek to keep Black people tethered to handouts and second-class citizenship. To these people, I would offer a gentle reminder that we live in a system that was built through our labor and designed to commodify our very being. Even the historic legislations that have led to the shift to home ownership as a primary vehicle for wealth generation were meant to leave Black and brown people with no access to opportunity. That you do not understand that there is no real way to uplift us all through the current model of ownership without stepping on your brother's neck shows how clearly you have missed a most important lesson of history of this economic system.
Thank you.
And if we as a people, a city, and a nation cannot envision a different modality of both housing and wealth generation, we will never truly get there. Thank you.
Thank you.